three young brothers vanish without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that has haunted their family and community for years. Their father's cryptic words and unsettling behavior add to the mystery, fueling theories that range from the unimaginable to the impossible. As time passes and the case grows colder, the question still lingers. What really happened to the Skelton brothers? It was Thanksgiving Day, 2010. In the quiet town of Morenci, Michigan, families gathered around their tables, sharing meals and stories. But for Tanya Zuvers, the holiday was a brief respite in the midst of a contentious divorce. That day, she made a difficult choice, one she would come to regret for the rest of her life. On the morning of November 26, 2010, three young boys, Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton, were expected home by their mother, Tanya. It was the day after Thanksgiving, and Tanya had graciously let her ex-husband, John Skelton, spend the holiday with their sons. The family was going through a divorce, but Tanya wanted the boys to have a normal Thanksgiving, despite the circumstances. Andrew was the oldest, a protector by nature. Alexander, the middle child, was energetic and full of questions. And Tanner, the youngest, was a joyful spirit, always ready to make his brothers laugh. That evening, Tanya spoke to her boys over the phone. They sounded happy, talking excitedly about their plans for the next day, Black Friday shopping to get new fan gear for a local high school football game. It was a moment of normalcy, a fleeting sense of peace in a fractured family. Little did she know, it would be the last time she ever heard their voices. The next morning, Tanya waited for John to drop off the boys at their usual meeting spot. She called John repeatedly, but there was no answer. By mid-afternoon, desperation took hold. She got into her car and drove straight to John's house, her heart pounding in her chest. When Tanya arrived at John's house, she knocked on the door, calling out for John, but there was no response and no trace of her sons. She called the police and learned that John was in the emergency room, being treated for a broken ankle. He had reportedly attempted suicide by hanging, falling from a rope tied to the banister of his own home. But there was something even more disturbing than John's injuries. No one had seen the boys since the previous day. When the police entered John's house, they found a scene of destruction. Broken glass littered the floor, furniture was overturned, and electrical wires were slashed. To Tanya and the investigators, it was clear that something terrible had happened under John's care. The authorities wasted no time. An Amber Alert was issued and the FBI was called in. The entire community of Morenci sprang into action, desperate to find the three missing boys. But as the search began, John's story was already starting to fall apart. Initially, John's explanation seemed straightforward. The boys were safe with friends and would return soon. However, as detectives pressed for more details, his story quickly began to unravel. John then claimed he had handed the boys over to a woman named Joanne Taylor, a kind-hearted stranger who was supposedly taking them to their mother, Tanya. But when the police asked for specifics, John faltered. He couldn't provide a phone number, an address, or even a clear description of this mysterious woman. It didn't take long for investigators to conclude that Joanne Taylor didn't exist. As the pressure mounted, John changed his story once again. This time, he insisted the boys were sent to live with an Amish or Mennonite group he referred to as an underground sanctuary. According to John, this secretive community had taken the boys to a farm near the Ohio-Indiana border where they would be safe and hidden. However, when police investigated this claim, they found no evidence of such a group. Experts familiar with Amish and Mennonite communities also dismissed the idea, noting it would be highly unusual for them to take in children under such circumstances, especially without any formal documentation. The police turned to John's phone records, hoping to trace his movements. The evidence was chilling. Around 4:30 a.m. on the morning of November 26th, John's phone pinged near his home in Morenci, but shortly after, it began traveling southwest, heading into Ohio. By 5 a.m., the last ping was detected near Holiday City, Ohio, before the phone went silent. It was off the grid for nearly 2 hours before reappearing back in Morenci at 6:45 a.m. The police now had a key area of interest. The Ohio Turnpike cuts through stretches of dense forest, abandoned fields, and isolated campgrounds. Search teams were dispatched, and soon the entire community joined in. Buses filled with volunteers scoured the woods and waterways, calling out the boys' names, hoping for a response that never came. The days blurred into each other. For Tanya, it was a haze of panic, fear, and disbelief. The boys' aunt, Tanilla McCain, described it as a period of endless waiting, the uncertainty gnawing at their resolve. Each day, they hoped it would be the day the boys were found. But with every passing hour, that hope grew dimmer. By the end of November, John Skelton was arrested and charged with 3 counts of unlawful imprisonment. He was the last person seen with Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner, and his erratic behavior made him the prime suspect. But even as the legal proceedings began, the search continued. It wasn't the first time John had tried to take the boys away from Tanya. Just 2 months before their disappearance, while they were still married, John had abruptly pulled the boys out of school and told the staff they were going on a trip to Florida. He didn't say when they would be back. Tanya frantically called the police, and they managed to intercept John before he left the state. After that incident, Tanya filed for divorce and was granted full custody. Despite his arrest, John refused to reveal what happened to the boys. He sat in jail, silent and uncooperative. Investigators pressed him, but he continued to offer the same outlandish claims, insisting that he had handed the boys over to an organization to protect them from harm. The search stretched on for weeks, covering miles of Ohio and Michigan wilderness. But as December arrived, the focus began to shift. The police started preparing for the grim possibility that they were no longer searching for missing children, but for their remains. In February 2011, the case officially transitioned from a missing persons investigation to a homicide case. John faced new charges of kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment, each carrying a potential life sentence. Yet even then, he refused to disclose what he had done with the boys. The community of Morenci was left in shock, grappling with the loss of 3 innocent children. Candlelight vigils were held, yellow ribbons adorned trees, and people prayed for a miracle that never came. For years, tips trickled in, each one a tiny glimmer of hope. But none of them led to a breakthrough. As time passed, the seasons changed, but the questions remained. In 2017, a potential lead brought a surge of hope. A set of 3 juvenile remains was discovered in western Montana. For a moment, it seemed like the answer might finally be within reach. But DNA testing revealed that the bones were over 99 years old. Once again, the family's hopes were shattered. Today, it has been over a decade since the Skelton brothers vanished without a trace. Age progression photos show what Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner might look like now, teenagers with bright smiles and hopeful eyes. But to their mother, they remained frozen in time. The same young faces she kissed goodbye on Thanksgiving Day, 2010. The search for answers continues. There are theories, dark ones, that John murdered his own children and buried them somewhere deep in the Amish countryside. Others believe that perhaps the boys were handed off to someone who still holds them captive, lost to a world of brainwashing and control. But as the years tick by, the likelihood of such scenarios grows slimmer. In 2023, Tanya made the painful decision to petition the court to have her sons declared legally deceased. It was not a decision made lightly. It was a recognition of the time that has passed and the absence of any concrete evidence that her boys are alive. But it wasn't a surrender. Tanya Zuvers still holds on to the smallest sliver of hope that one day the truth will come out. This case is far from closed. Somewhere, someone knows what happened to Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner. Maybe it's John, sitting in his prison cell, still holding on to his secrets. Maybe it's someone else who played a part in their disappearance, lurking in the shadows, hoping the truth remains buried. Until the day those boys are found, the search will go on. Because for Tanya, for their family, and for a small town that refuses to forget, The Skelton brothers are still out there somewhere. Before you go, if you're as hooked on unsolved mysteries and true crime as we are, make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you never miss a case. And if you're curious about more unsolved mysteries, check out our latest video into the chilling disappearance of Relisha Rudd. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe and stay curious.